This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
Okay, get into it. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember what you're doing. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Greetings, one and all. Lembit Öpik here on Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV. And thank you if you've subscribed. Let's get this over with first. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. But Unprecedented TV, and if you can't find it, then put my name in as well, Lembit, Lembit. And then you will have no problem finding our station. We hope to win an award sometime. And that's the subject of the conversation today. Awards, press awards. What are they for? Who wins them? And do they really reflect the accuracy of the media? This is the time of year, it seems to me, that a lot of press events take place. I was at one very recently, in fact. I've been to a couple, actually, recently. What do they really celebrate? Do you actually have faith in the press? Does the mainstream really represent what you want to hear about? I've noticed as we've come on air that the British economy has shrunk unexpectedly. Well, no, it's not unexpected. It was predicted. It's only the mainstream that seems to think it's a surprise that our accident-prone and underqualified, in my view at least, Chancellor Rachel Reeves has presided over 2 consecutive months of shrinkage. So to what extent does the press actually pay attention to what everybody else can see? Are they really just getting together to slap each other on the back and say, well, yes, we're doing very well? Or is there actually some merit in it? And where does the British mainstream media stand in terms of its international counterparts? Well, joining me now is somebody who runs his own awards as well. It's Simon Spanswick. Good day to you. How are you?
I'm not too bad. A little bit fragile around the edges because last night I was at one of these awards that you talked about, and it was quite an early morning getting home on the last train from King's Cross for me. So treat me with a little bit of gentleness, please.
You're not the target today. These are the awards I think you're talking about. Press Cadets British Journalism Awards. What are they?
They are open to any British journalist organisation that produces news, investigations, coverage of stories, whether in print, digital or broadcast. And this event last night had 300 odd people from newspapers, from The Guardian to The Eye to the Sun, and broadcasters from Channel 4 News through to the BBC and everybody in between.
You do your own awards as well, the AIBs they're called. What's the difference between that? There they are, yes. Beautiful, a beautiful award, actually. In my view, more interesting than a slab of perspex, but more like an Oscar, actually, but better. What do your AIBs do, Association of International Broadcasting Awards?
They are for international organisations. Anybody can enter from New Zealand to Venezuela. And indeed they do. We get entries from about 50 countries. So whereas the British Journalism Awards are what it says on the tin for the UK press and broadcast industry, ours are for broadcast and digital across the world, and we get work in all sorts of different languages, and we've got a panel of judges who are spread across all 5 continents. So that's the difference. One's a national event and ours is international.
We'll probably talk about them again in a minute. Let's get back to the British Journalism Awards then. Let's get down to brass tacks. To what extent is this just backslapping by journalists who tell each other how good they are?
I suppose every industry has a desire to be awarded the best, whether your local baker is, or whether you are a broadcaster or press organization. So inevitably, awards are a bit of backslapping, and everybody being happy that they've won, less happy if they haven't. What struck me about these awards last night was that the shortlist was quite long, with sometimes 8 or 9 organizations shortlisted in each category, which is an awful lot. We try and keep ours down to 6 or 7. It's hard work filtering all this different work that's submitted. So I've got some sympathy for Press Gazette's British Journalism Award in having quite long shortlists. But yes, of course, there's backslapping. Of course, people are pleased to go up on stage and receive a shiny bit of perspex saying that they're the best of the best in that category, whether it's online video journalism or crime and legal reporting.
One of the big winners is Kathy Newman. Is she from Channel 4? She seemed to do well. Yeah, that's she. Is that Kathy Newman?
That is Kathy Newman, with an RTS award by the looks of things.
Yeah, she does win a lot of awards. She won Journalist of the Year, I think, last night.
Yes, and Channel 4, she was also on stage for another Channel 4 win. Yes, she is, I suppose, put forward by Channel 4 to represent them at awards, and some people, like any on-air personality, whether it's Kathy Newman or Lembit Öpik, there's a love-hate relationship. Some people love them, some people don't like them. So yeah, it's like Marmite. Everybody is a bit Marmite to somebody else.
I have to admit, just for the sake of disclosure, I was at these awards myself. I got a name check from Jeremy Vine from the BBC, who was actually presenting the awards. Well, at least he was the master of ceremonies last night. It was quite nice, actually. I had a good chat with him. He and I maybe don't have exactly the same politics, but yeah, he's a decent enough chap. But this is the thing. I sound like I'm part of the old boys club now because I'm saying things like that. There could be those who watch unprecedented TV, for example, precisely because we're not as yet the mainstream. I always say we don't want to beat the mainstream. We want to be the mainstream. And they might be inherently suspicious of these awards because you've got Kathy Newman from Channel 4, you've got ITV, you've got BBC. And they all say things like, if you're watching this live, the UK economy shrank unexpectedly. There's nothing unexpected about it. Anybody who thinks Rachel Reeves is doing a good job is probably not really very economically minded. But even if I'm wrong about that, if you scroll through the mainstream media, and I know that these were the press awards last night, but still media of a sort, they all seem to say the same story. You get the same narrative about the Ukraine war, where all the mainstream media seem to want to support Zelensky and don't really want to put the Russian case. All the mainstream media tend to talk about a climate emergency. So to what extent is there a herd mentality in this sector where they don't really want to stand out? They all tend to conform to the mainstream.
Well, I think it could be a couple of issues, one of which might be that, of course, forecasts are put out by various organizations looking at the state of the economy in this country, just as they are in other nations around the world. And if these supposedly respected forecasting organizations say, oh, there's going to be a growth or only a tiny little dip, and then it's proved to be completely wrong, clearly people will have reported the initial finding. Excuse me. And therefore, that's where you get the herd mentality, because if a major respected organization issues a statement, the media will pick that up and report it.
But yet, I would say I've got quite a lot of authority on it because I run Unprecedented TV. I would say that we at Unprecedented TV would say the UK economy shrank just as predicted because we've got a useless chancellor. Now, you don't hear anybody really saying that on the mainstream media. I actually thought even the mainstream, even, for example, the British Broadcasting Corporation would have said Rachel Reeves has presided over a contraction when she promised growth, but they haven't said that. And I just wonder if, to an extent, when I go to these sorts of awards, there's a resistance to standing up to the state and to the establishment.
Perhaps you're right. I suppose there is still some deference in reporters' circles about respecting elected politicians and their statements. Clearly, they get hauled over the coals all sorts of times with incisive questioning when they are doing the round of TV and radio studios after a big issue has come up. But I suppose there's still this slight respect for politicians. Should we have respect for politicians? You were one once. Would you rather be respected than lambasted the whole time if you've been elected by your constituents? I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps we should get your view, Lembit.
Well, I'll give you my view. The television broadcast media, the area that you and the AIB focuses on, in my view, tended to be, in my opinion, more respectful than the written press. The written press was diabolical. I discovered that I'd lost, or my then partner had lost, a child on the front page of the News of the World. I lost Lembit's baby. There's nothing respectful about that. That's permanently damaged me. There's nothing respectful about what that disgusting group of charlatans did when a life was involved. So my opinion is that the mainstream broadcasting media is a bit more respectful, but the British press, I actually think, just live in the gutter. I really just feel that, and it's partly informed by the fact that there wasn't respect for me. I don't expect people. I don't think politicians should expect to be revered. I think that a proper media would be quite acerbic at times and quite critical. And I would agree that, for example, to take the Rachel Reeves example, she should be dragged over the coals. Her CV wasn't honest. She hasn't delivered any of her economic goals. But when it gets personal, and I think the only time it should really get personal, Simon, is when you're a hypocrite. You say don't do something and then you do it yourself. But I don't really care about the intricacies of, for example, Keir Starmer's personal life, except in as much as if he could be blackmailed or if he's been a hypocrite about it myself. So that would be my view. And I have to tell you, I think the media is falling short in this country.
Yeah, I think that you hit on an interesting difference between broadcast and newspapers, because broadcasters, because if we look back at the way broadcasting regulation was formed in this country over the last few decades, it was felt by regulators that because broadcast media comes into our homes uninvited, there needs to be a level of propriety, level of impartiality, and that still governs broadcasting today, although some people may disagree with whether it's still needed. The difference is you went to a newsagents in the days when newsagents still existed and you saw all the newspapers. You could decide whether you bought a left-wing newspaper, a centrist one, or a right-wing one. That was your decision. But so therefore, the press didn't need to be regulated in quite the way that broadcasting did. Maybe that's a very old-fashioned set of arguments, but it was certainly the one that has shaped UK broadcast regulation and regulation in quite a lot of other countries around the world as well.
I suppose my little diatribe, which you provoked, of course, by asking me my opinion, is directed primarily at the written press. I think the written press in this country isn't really regulated at all. They pay for the regulator. And when I was treated absolutely abysmally a few years ago, so much so that I ended up in hospital with a stress-related issue, the regulator took the press aside, even though it was obvious that they'd broken the law. But nothing happened. And if I had £10 million, I could have taken it further and I'd have won. But the little person hasn't got a chance. If you're the king, or Elon Musk or somebody like that, you probably can get justice, but that's because you can afford it. And they're very powerful. And I think that they are totally responsible with the power. Returning to this, though, it's obvious that some people are very genuinely committed to doing the right thing. I actually have to say, my conversation with Jeremy Vine, it drifted into the fact that he's recently won a case against somebody who said some very bad things, which I won't repeat because they are libelous about Jeremy Vine. But it had taken him a lot of effort, and it was obviously a tiring process. So when members of the broadcast media themselves end up in these actions, it causes me to ask this question: is there any serious regulation at all? Though it has to be said, in his case, and this leads to another interesting area, he was being libeled on social networks, which don't seem to be regulated at all, really, or hardly at all.
No, they aren't. And it is then up to a person who is affected by something that has been said on a social media platform to take their own action. And as you say, unless you've got millions of pounds, taking any sort of court action is expensive, as anybody who has tried to recover a bill from or money owed from a company that refuses to pay them for something or other, or any other issue. I think unless you're a barrister and a lawyer used to dealing with the court system, it's probably pretty daunting for the ordinary man or woman on the street to go into battle, particularly if you're trying to take on a better resourced organization. And then is it the publisher, is it the YouTubes or X that you should be suing, or is it the person because they've carried this material, or is it the originator of whatever claim has been carried on those platforms?
Yeah, that's the issue for me. As I said, from my own personal experience, I don't have any faith at all in regulation. I've very rarely lost anything I've done. I'm sure I've always been right, but the system hadn't protected me. We'll come back to that in just a minute. You're watching me, Lembit, Öpik, here with Simon Spanswick, who's the Chief Executive of the Association for International Broadcasting. And we're talking about press awards, some awards which I attended, if you're watching this live, yesterday. Just a quick, interesting question, a cryptic question from Jade59. What's going on in Bulgaria? Is it another drive by the infamous NGOs, that's non-governmental organizations, to destabilize the government? Don't know the story, Jade59. I do go to Bulgaria a lot, and they seem to have a general election about every 6 months. So they don't need NGOs to destabilize them. They have them pretty often anyway. Before we go further, though, Tim Scott uncancelled. He is back in full form. He's the head of the Freedom Association, does some great reviews of news, which stand the test of time. If you go to the archive on Unprecedented TV and the YouTube, you'll find some great shows there as well. What's this? Great value from Tim Scott on Tim Scott uncancelled there. But back to the matter in hand here. These awards, they celebrate what you might call, Simon, the traditional media, but then we've got things like X and so forth. And a lot of people, an increasing number of people depend on Elon Musk's X, for example, for their news. Now, there's a strength and a weakness to that. Everyone can be a citizen publisher, I suppose. But the downside is you're not sure how much you can trust what they say.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's very important to rely on multiple sources, particularly these days. There are all sorts of people that put stories up on X saying that this has happened or that has happened, which are subsequently taken by lots of people, but subsequently told to be completely proved to be completely false. So we have to be, I think, very circumspect on accessing news, whether it's through Facebook or X or any other social platform, because you haven't got the considerable teams of people working in newsrooms that broadcasters and newspapers have, whatever we think about newspapers. But I think it's also important to remember that one of the things that struck me about the British Journalism Awards is that it celebrated investigations, and it's only very well-resourced organizations that can shed light into the darker corners of society and find out what's happening. For example, there was a runner-up, BBC's Africa Eye, which investigated the killings of citizens in Kenya, the youth who were protesting outside the parliament. No inquiry has been held by the Kenyan authorities. And the BBC's Africa Eye team did a forensic investigation to find, from hundreds and hundreds of press photographs and videos and social media posts of the protests, to find out who were the people responsible for the killings, where the army was obviously ordered to shut down these protests in spite of the cost. And you think of other investigations that have gone on into the PPE scandals during COVID that were undertaken by broadcasters and newspapers, or abuse in care homes or factory farms. And the average person who puts out news on X does not have the resources or the expertise, indeed, to go and do undercover filming in challenging environments, to uncover corruption, uncover wrongdoing. So I think it's very important that people do not throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the existing media organizations, the legacy media organizations. There's room for both new players like Unprecedented and for existing ones, whether it's the BBC or Channel 4 here in the UK or the ABC in Australia, or anywhere else in the world.
You mentioned the BBC quite a few times there. They've had their fair share of troubles, though. You're implying in a way that the BBC is to be trusted, but who can have possibly not noticed the fact that Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, is talking about suing the BBC for doctoring or broadcasting a doctored video, which implied that he was telling people to fight and riot on Capitol Hill. When you actually see the original, you can see that it was completely faked. The way they put two parts of a speech over 40 minutes apart together, that totally undermines their credibility to me.
It was an appalling lapse of judgment. I mean, I work for the BBC just as you have, Lembit, and we know that I was taught a long time ago that you leave your prejudices at the door, because you need to walk in there and have a completely open mind about everything and not taint it with your own life experience or voting patterns or what have you. And certainly I was taught that if you are putting two separate quotes together from different parts of a speech or anything that's happening, you use in television, you use a white flash to indicate that there is a time that they come from two separate points in a speech. That's a convention that's been used for donkey's years, and how that didn't happen and how that program was signed off baffles me and a lot of other people, I think, within the BBC as well as around the world.
That's the issue, though. The BBC, and you're right, I worked there for many years. I have to say the training that the BBC gives, frankly, is second to none. It's absolutely exceptional in terms of the technical capabilities of the BBC. Unimpeachably good, but very impeachably bad when they quite obviously broadcast something which was deliberately intended to make it look like Donald Trump was sponsoring violence on Capitol Hill. Now, that's a real problem, because BBC wins a lot of awards and so on, but it's very hard to respect that organization, which ultimately is owned by the taxpayer, whenever they can do something like that. And I've got a problem with that, because there's Trump with Keir Starmer, because we talked about respect for politicians. You don't have to even like Donald Trump. You have to have a respect for the truth. And I know this is more to do with your area than the press awards we started talking about. But how can the BBC have got so far away from its raison d'etre, which is in the charter? It's in the charter that they should be purveyors of objective reality and truth, as best they can do it.
That's a question that will be pored over and studied for many years to come, I think. I don't think we've heard the end of this episode. What I do hope is that it's been a wake-up call to everybody involved in broadcasting, that you simply can't do that sort of thing. I mean, what also staggers me is that Panorama, the program that did this, is 50, 60 years old. It's the flagship news and current affairs program, goes out in peak viewing time on a weekday, and has covered all sorts of things with extraordinary depth and clarity, and has done investigations into abuse in care homes and things like that have resulted in shake-ups of legislation and arrests and prosecutions of people involved in all sorts of crimes. But this would seem to be a crime in itself. Not the same as abusing people, but to lose the trust of the audience that's been built up over decades is a very difficult thing then to recover from, because it's very hard to build a reputation. It's incredibly easy to lose one, essentially overnight. And that's what's happened here. And I can only hope that people within the organization are going to move heaven and high, whatever, to make sure that that sort of thing does not recur.
Yeah, that does seem important to me as well. The thing I lament is it's not that difficult to interpret the BBC Charter, which does talk about objectivity. But wherever you stand on the subject, just from a value space, to make it look like the President of the United States was inciting violence. And they did it twice. They had it on twice, 2 different shows. That's a big problem. Okay, I've had my rant about that. I'm disappointed by it, really, because if you can't trust the BBC to get something like that right, you have to independently corroborate everything. That was their job. I have to cross-reference things. And sometimes I actually I have to tell you, I trust social media more than I trust the mainstream. Certainly, I felt, maybe not going too far down this path, but I felt when the Southport murders of those poor children took place, the state colluded with the mainstream to tell us lies, and that led to riots all over the country. But that's another story. Now, one other change which I've noticed, and I was talking to some of the people involved in it, is how the media is structured. The BBC's got thousands and thousands of staff, people all over the world, but there's a new way of doing this. Journalism.net was there. True, they also sponsors. I think they paid for coverage, but I was very impressed with what they're doing. What are they up to? What are they changing?
Well, journalist.net is a directory, if you like, of freelancers around the world, freelance journalists, freelance camera people, freelance drone operators, people who are involved in and can go to news stories as they happen. So they've got about 10,000 people on their books that news organizations can access to cover a story, because not every news organization has somebody in every part of the world. And this is a way of accessing talent, on-air talent, people who report news in different parts of the world. If there's an earthquake somewhere, a natural disaster, or plane crash, something like that, and for routine stories as well. Rather than maintaining an expensive bureau somewhere, you can call on freelancers. And one of the interesting things is we're working with journalist.net on an accreditation scheme for journalists who will have a sort of tick mark, if you like, after they go through some rigorous assessments about their capabilities and their work and their reliability and various other metrics that we're going to test them on, so that if you're working in a high-pressured newsroom and some story breaks and you need to get hold of somebody, you can look for somebody that's got the AIB pass tick mark and be pretty assured that their material is going to be reliable, honest, decent, truthful.
That could spell the end of things like the BBC, though, couldn't it? The reason I'm asking you about this is because it seems to me a lot more sensible to call up a freelancer through this journalism.net thing in Fiji when there's a story you want to cover in Fiji once every 2 years, instead of having an entire bureau based there at British taxpayers' expense, or whoever it happens to be's expense, expecting them to dig up stories to justify their existence. And if this model works, that's going to even further drive the alternative and the nascent new media up, while these old organizations will look like overstaffed dinosaurs.
There's still, I think, an argument for maintaining bureaus in important parts of the world. You need somebody in Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan to cover stories in East Asia, because you've got somebody that you can call up at a moment's notice, not just to do news programming, but also provide advice to crews going in to do other things, producers working on other output areas other than news. So having that base, I think, is still quite important. But the world is an awfully big place. And as I said, you can't have bureaus everywhere. And so your example of Fiji, I don't think there's any news organization, apart from perhaps the ABC in Australia, that maintains a permanent correspondent in somewhere like Fiji or many of the other Pacific islands. And therefore being able to access a freelancer to do pieces to camera, go out and interview people, report on politics, and Fiji's had its fair share of political drama over the past few years, is very, very useful. It's an additional tool in the news editor's arsenal, I think. I'm not sure it's ever going to supplant totally news organizations that have a big network of their own staff around the world, but it certainly can be a cost-saving benefit and the ability to add to your coverage by having more people out there that you can rely on and call up at a moment's notice.
So last of all, these awards, self-congratulatory to an extent by the sector, I suppose. Does the AIB have any plans to reach out to the new media, unprecedented, self-publishers, people who have hundreds of thousands of followers on podcasts?
Absolutely, because we've always moved with the time. I mean, the AIB was formed when international broadcasting consisted almost entirely of shortwave radio stations around the world. Over the 3.5 decades that we've been going, clearly international radio has gone on a long fade out, and it's been replaced by television and digital platforms. So we've moved with the times, and as the industry changes, any organization like ours has to also adapt and respond to market forces, if you like, unlike certain chancellors.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It implies you agree with me, but it only implies it. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
You might think that I couldn't possibly comment. Yeah, so we are looking at how best to respond to the needs of this emerging sector. Is it emerging or has it emerged? I think it's possibly still developing quite nicely, and has got huge opportunities. We need to be able to respond to that sector with what it needs, because do they need advice on cybersecurity? Do they need advice on media freedom issues, the things that the legacy players all come to us for? The jury's out on that, and we're happy to have discussions with organizations that are setting themselves up or have set themselves up on these new platforms that are doing things slightly differently. They may be more fleet of foot than legacy broadcasters. They may do things differently, maybe slightly less reverentially, going back to some of our earlier discussions. So yes, we're certainly looking at that. I don't have all the answers yet. Watch this space.
Well, I'm sure that Unprecedented TV would like to persuade you to give us an award. Let's have lunch. What are you doing next week? Are you free?
The run up to Christmas is always hectic, Lembit.
Happy times ahead. Thank you very much indeed. Where can people find out more about the AIB, by the way, the Association of International
You can go to our
Broadcasting?
website, which is www.aib.org.uk.
Thank you so much. That is the Chief Executive of the Association for International Broadcasting, which is the voice, the global voice of current affairs broadcasting. My concluding thoughts are twofold. Number one, I think that it's unstoppable now that social networks and that new category, part of which is inhabited by Unprecedented TV, we like to think ourselves as the pioneers, that's going to take an ever larger share of the market because people are disillusioned, I think, by the old mainstream that just looks like it colludes with the establishment all the time. The second thing I predict is that we're going to have to find some way of being able to trust the media a bit more. As Chief Executive of Unprecedented TV, I have a very simple ethos. All my presenters are entitled to express their points of view, but they have to flag them as such. And I don't want any of them to present their opinions as facts. And I think as long as you know where someone's coming from, then you can draw your own judgments as well. And I cite two examples of where the mainstream media is completely failing. One is, in my view, the climate hoax. Regular viewers know I don't think there's a climate emergency. And the second one is the way it reports wars, always on the side of its state sponsor. Now, I understand that. Why would you bite the hand that feeds you? But it does mean that you get suspect reportage. Maybe there isn't a way to fix that if you're going to be punished for saying it like it is. But if I've got anything to do with it, then Unprecedented TV will show how you can have facts and opinions and they can coexist quite comfortably. Why? Because I trust you, the viewer, to draw your own conclusions. I don't need to spoon feed you mine. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Thank you to Simon Spanswick and to the team. Do have your say as well. Lots more coming up. And don't forget, if you've got an idea for a show that you think we should make, you let us know and we're happy to consider it. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV. Have a good day.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.